Hey everybody, welcome to Marching Arts Education. This is Tim Hinton. So happy that you're here tonight. Really excited to have these two gentlemen with us. Jim Bailey, another fantastic D'Addario Education Collective webinar. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Tony Nuñez, somebody I really like a lot. Tony, I think you're awesome, man. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for facilitating this. It's awesome.
Absolutely. It's great to see you. I met you at the Arcadia Symposium last year, had such a great time, was so impressed with all that. How did the symposium go this year?
It was awesome. It exceeded our expectations and everybody walked away just very excited for 2020. So we're all very energized.
It's fantastic. It's such great stuff. So anybody that doesn't know about it, go to Arcadia Symposium online, and it's a really cool thing that's going on there that Tony's doing. Jim, I'm going to let you do the official introduction for Tony. So happy you guys are here.
Yeah, well, thank you again, and thanks to everybody that has signed on. This is a really exciting series that we have. If you've watched these in the past, or if you have signed on live before, then you know kind of the concept of these is to really try to identify things that we feel collectively people need help with at this particular moment. So the thing that we're going to be talking about tonight for everybody is concepts, strategies, and techniques that can really help you build a stronger program. You know, it's July, you know, the line has been set, all the kids for the most part, unless you've got some stragglers maybe that move in, you know, kind of where people are going to be, drills starting to get written, music's getting pumped out, everybody's getting ready for band camp, and it's really kind of that critical time when the cement hasn't quite cured in terms of how the program can be structured and things that you can do, not just from an instructional standpoint, but from a programmatic standpoint that can really pay off dividends throughout the entire season. So these are things that we're going to focus on, and I thought Tony would be an excellent person to kind of help describe that, since he's been a part of building a lot of great programs at a lot of different levels, from all the way at the top of the game with RCC to what he's done with Arcadia High School, South Hills, you know, what he does to collaborate with other educators and other teachers, and what he's seen from a programmatic standpoint that can really help your program. So, Tony, very happy to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, and it's been a long time. You and I have known each other for quite some time, and I've seen you do some really incredible things, which is really, really evident to the very first time I met you, and I think it was 2007. So it's been a minute. And you know, the things that we're going to talk about tonight, you know, are just basically from your perspective, what you've seen at various places. So let's start out with maybe just giving people a little bit of an introduction on your path. People know you now, but you know, let's maybe give them a little bit of a perspective as to your journey to get you to this point.
Sure. Well, I'm entering into my 20th year in the activity. I started back in 1999, 2000, as most people do, just a young person teaching the drum line. And about a year into it, I was able to start writing and start designing. And 2000, 2001 was really when I dove in and tried my hand at writing music for the front ensemble, for the battery. And then as SCPA was, you know, being birthed and being offered to everybody here in Southern California, I started writing drill and doing staging. So I've really been, you know, doing all of those facets of the activity for about 20 years now, starting at Baldwin Park High School, Roland High School, and then eventually starting at Arcadia High School in 2000, and then starting at South Hills in 2002. So I'm still at Arcadia, and it's pretty exciting to start from that $150 a month person to, you know, somebody who's made their career in this activity. So I'm very blessed, and I'm very happy to have a career doing music, doing pageantry, doing design, and I think it's a great time for others to choose this as a career opportunity.
Yeah, and obviously in that time, you know, pageantry arts is a really, really progressive activity, and it evolves really quickly. And how have you been able to evolve along with it? And what is your process in reflecting and, you know, kind of looking forward to what you want to do next?
I mean, I really got involved with the activity just again putting myself out there, designing and writing, and asking people to help me. So I got Bill Bachman involved really early with teaching privately at my school. Bill and I had a really great relationship when he was here in Southern California. I got Mike Jackson involved with what I was doing at Roland, and he got me involved with what he was doing at Mission Viejo for a time. And from that just stemmed a lot of different relationships from their circle of friends. And I just really quickly found myself really entrenched in teaching drum corps, doing pulse percussion for the very first time when that was starting and emerging, really volunteering a lot with SCPA when that was starting. So I think it's kind of right place, right time where I was starting and all these things were starting around me. And I just said yes to everything. There wasn't anything that I couldn't do. And if I couldn't do it, I was going to figure out how to do it. And I think that's just the way that I've approached things. Just say yes and figure it out and do your best. That's been my mantra.
Cool. Yeah. So let's focus in on maybe, would you say South Hills is like the first program where you really cut your teeth and you really were able to go through a significant growth as a designer, as an instructor?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was doing South Hills, we got involved with SCPA, and in 2007, Mike Jackson actually told me, "Hey, this is really great stuff, and it's unfortunate that other people aren't seeing what you and your team are doing at South Hills. You should really consider going to WGI." And in 2008, we went to WGI in the A class, and we won a world championship at that point. And that was really validating to hear the community of my friends say, "Hey, you should take this to the national level." And then going and doing that. And 3 out of the 4 times South Hills went from 2008, we won a world championship. And that was really a turning point for me. And that's when I started to, nudge the band director, Kevin Sherrill at Arcadia, say, "Hey, I'd be really interested to write for Arcadia, for the World Group." And I had some success with PSA and PSO. And so he said, "Cool, let's do it." And, 2 years in, Kevin Shaw and I started writing, and then we won a world championship in 2011. That was also the same year that I joined Music City Mystique as a sound designer. And so in 2011, we won a PIW championship as well. So there were a lot of little indicators between 2008 and 2011 that were kind of telling me that, hey, maybe you've got something here. Go get involved. Go do as much work as you can as a sound designer, as an arranger, as a visual designer. And it was really encouraging to just be out there working with several different drum corps at a time, working with different independent groups, doing all the high school stuff here locally. And that's not very sustainable long term, but there was a 4 or 5 year period where it just like dove in, said yes, figured it out. I really gleaned a lot from that experience, and have really, encouraged others to do as much as they can by themselves for as long as they can.
Right. So again, thinking about the people that are watching this or will watch this, they're in the process right now of building their program, of establishing what it is that they're doing, and eventually they want to, I'm sure, have success. They want to win whatever success is defined by them. They want to win championships or win state. And
Sure.
as you're talking about, how Mike looked at your program at South Hills and said, "Hey, you're doing really great things. You should be doing, WGI and be more on the national stage." Even just to get to that point, there's all these other things. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen behind the scenes in order to even get that recognition. So keeping things kind of focused in this particular topic, can you talk us a little bit about, like, when you got to South Hills, how did you set the program up? Like, how did you, let's say, for instance, define expectations for the program? Like, here's what we're going to do. Here's what South Hills is about. And here's how we're going to measure that on a daily basis.
Well, when I look back on it now, when I look at what is happening at Arcadia right now, if I look back 10 years ago, I don't think I did a very good job. Well, as it relates to, I kind of lived at the program. I live 5 minutes away from South Hills High School, so I was always there. And I think just the frequency of me being there was a large part of it. I didn't have to, plan from afar, and it was just me doing it by myself. Like all the teaching from 8 on a hand to writing the show. And, that wasn't sustainable. So I started to build a team. And so Bill Bachman said, hey, you need to hire Jesus Alcantara and get him involved. So I hired my first person. And I think that was an indicator to me that, okay, you can't do this by yourself. You need to start building a team around you. And Jesus was really that first team member that I had who really helped me teach so that I can focus more on the design. So I think that was the first, chain and the first link in the chain was to start to build that team around the program, around me, around the goals. And I think I was always very clear. Here are my goals. Here's what I want to do. And we spent a lot of time talking about what we could do, how we were going to do it amongst ourselves. And then I know I spent a lot of time sitting down with the kids, with the band director, with the parents. Okay, here's the plan. Here's the best way that I can explain what the plan is. Here's the vision. I don't have all the answers, but we're going to find out what the answers are. And if you think you can help based on anything that I've said or that we're saying, please, let's talk, let's collaborate. And the door has always been very open from the parent side of things, from the director, and then from my first staff member, first team member, which was Jesus. So I think that was always there. And I think that played a large part of the success was communication with the parents, communication with the band director, really trying to let the band director know what my vision was for the students, for the program, for the trajectory of the program. And that going to WGI was a part of that whole piece of the puzzle. It wasn't the puzzle itself, it was just a part of it. Like I said, I just lived at the program for many, many years. And so I think that combination is what really set the baseline for me, which was doing everything, living at the program, hiring that first person to come and help me and live the program with me, and having a very, very supportive band director. His name is Mike Wooten. Very supportive, didn't say no to anything if it didn't cost money. So that was great to have that support.
Yeah, and you and I talked the other day about living the program and doing everything. And I think back, I think everybody that wants to be great at this activity has to go through that in their own way. Like they have to do everything, and they have to have this internal struggle. I know I did too, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. So I realized, like you did, I can't do everything. But yeah, you have that attitude, I think, is healthy in informing whatever it is that you want to eventually do in the program, whatever function or role or whatever specialty you want to have within the program. To be able to have gone through all those other roles informs where you are in that design or caption head or instruction role, and it's healthy to a degree as long as you come to that realization, and you don't bury yourself or stress yourself out too much.
I mean, I think at those early stages, it just felt like one job. It didn't feel like I was doing all the jobs. It just felt like that is what the job was, because that's what was modeled to me when I was in high school. Is there was one guy and he did everything, and it's like that's the same person who got me involved in the activity. So I didn't know any better. I didn't know that there should be a battery or a visual or a front ensemble, and sound design wasn't really a thing early on, but that became a part of the thing that I needed to learn myself. So I think now, if you're in the activity right now, it's very segmented, and you see this really prevalent in drum corps, where there's there's categories of people that have these lanes, and they kind of do this, and sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. And I think early on for me, it was just one big lane, and it's like you got to get all this stuff done, and that's the job. Nowadays, you can specialize in one thing or two things. I think people are really hesitant to kind of look at the whole program and put themselves in there and do that. So maybe a different time, but I'd be interested to see if what kinds of questions people might have about specifics, about certain lanes or certain things as they're trying to develop and grow their program. Because we can dive into any one of those, or we can dive into all of them.
Yeah, yeah. Tim, are we doing on any questions that are popping up?
Hey, no questions at this time. So anybody that's watching, please feel free to type in a question on the right-hand bar, and I'll be monitoring those in the background. You guys are awesome, so just keep going.
Sure. Cool. Yeah. So actually, I have a question. Yeah. I've always kind of thought about like marching band, drum corps, drumline, pageantry arts in general as like a culture-based activity. And I talk a lot about this being a culture-based activity. What I mean by that is like in order to operate and be successful, you have to like embrace and perpetuate the culture of marching band, which means you're going to stand still and not scratch your nose, right? Is it unreasonable to ask you not to scratch your nose? Of course it's unreasonable. No math teacher would ask you that. But inside of not scratching your nose, there's a culture. There's a reason why you do that. There's a discipline. So whether it's at South Hills or whether it's Arcadia, can you talk a little bit about kind of how you set your culture? Like what is the culture within the groups that you teach, and a little bit maybe as to why you feel that's important to set it up how you do?
Sure. The culture has evolved as I've evolved. I definitely know that I was perpetuating the things that I was taught when I was marching Black Knights or RCC or Santa Clara Vanguard. I was just regurgitating the things that I was learning. And what I started to realize is that I was borrowing a little bit from this teacher and I borrowed a little bit from that teacher. And I very quickly understood that the limitations that my students were going to have were going to be based on my personal limitations. Mm-hmm. So I can only give what I know. So I've been constantly talking with people, taking private lessons, not just settling on my laurels of I marched here and I did this and I did that, and that was all I could give. I think I've constantly been learning and evolving and challenging myself on the types of information that I can give my students. And I think the culture for Arcadia, for example, has constantly evolved over 20 years as I've evolved as a person. And now I feel like we're more organized. I communicate more. I don't yell. In 2000, I yelled a lot. And in 2010, I yelled a little less, talked a little bit more. And now it's pretty rare that I will raise my voice for any reason, because I've built this team and culture around the students where, information is kind of the king, and transparency and setting expectations for the students and the parents and the directors are very, very important. How we do that, the frequency of communication, has all lent itself to a much more calm and relaxed rehearsal environment. Sometimes it's a little too relaxed for me. If I look back on, if I was doing this by myself and I'm, sweating and I'm pushing and I'm pulling and it's, hey, you, and it's, hey, don't do that. And it's, it's very active. And now it's a little bit more calculated and planned. And actually that's a more sustainable place to be in if you're going to make this your career. And I think I've had to learn that the hard way. And that's why now currently the culture of the program is more built around a team, and we're constantly challenging ourselves, challenging our assumptions of what we know and how we do it, and wondering, is this the best version of ourselves? How can we outdo ourselves every year from a management standpoint?
Yeah. One of the things that in the times I came out and seen Arcadia, this year and in years past, some of the stuff that I've seen that just kind of stuck out to me inside the culture is the student leadership aspect. Like I haven't been there on a day-to-day basis to see what you're telling them and what the expectations are and what the rehearsal etiquette is, but it's really, really apparent that it's first and foremost protected by the students. Like they kind of serve as the front line, because they have the ownership in the program. Mm-hmm. And I always felt that was really important, because I feel like to get their very best, you need to have their skin in the game.
Sure.
And I used to do little things like, rehearsal would start at 3 on the downbeat. When the clock, when the red hand strikes 12, whether I'm there or not, I need to hear beep, 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 and then we're playing eights, you know. So I was wondering if there's any specific things you do. And the reason I would do that, just I guess to elaborate a little bit, is I always felt like, you know, they had to have ownership and protection over rehearsal and not wait on me. Because if something happens, if you know, a wheel falls off a marimba or whatever 2 minutes before rehearsal starts, they know full well, they're smart kids and they have ownership over the program, and you're developing leadership. So I was wondering if there's certain things that you do rehearsal wise, little techniques, little tips, tricks that will kind of breed that.
Yeah, so every rehearsal, prior to every rehearsal, I'll send out a schedule to the staff, lay out all the goals, all the time frames for everything that we're going to do, and then we share that with the student leaders, so they get CC'd on the email, so they can have some visibility on what we're doing. That's usually the night before the rehearsal for that day. And every rehearsal starts with a visual block. It doesn't matter what we're doing, it's always going to start with visual. And visual is really the time where we stretch, and it sets the tone for what we're going to be doing for that day. So the students know, the leaders and all the kids have visibility on, here's what we're going to focus on, which means here are the things that we may not focus on. Here's where the energy is going to be. I put goals like we need to do this, 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 and this. And here's the time that we're going to do it. And really the visual team takes time during visual and warm up to set the kids up for those types of expectations. They really frame the students emotionally for that rehearsal. Once they're moving their bodies, they're getting stretched, and they're getting inside of this message, inside of this energy, then we go to warm up. And then the kids are playing, and they're already focused, they're already ready to go. It's very rare that we'll ever start a rehearsal with the metronome on. So usually we start rehearsal with, here's some music, here's a message from Ted Chang, our visual caption head for movement, and he's talking with them, he's chatting with them, and really kind of seeing where they are, and then getting them focused for that first hour. So that is a very, very important part of what we do at Arcadia, is that kind of back and forth communication at the start of rehearsal and prior to rehearsal beginning. And if I can, I'll lay out the plan for the next week, so the kids know we got a Tuesday rehearsal, then we got a Friday rehearsal, and then if there's a Saturday, they can see where we're going. And for me personally, if we have a lot of things to do, and let's say we're kind of getting into the season where the shows are starting, we really like to front load the rehearsals where we're doing a lot on Tuesday, and then we kind of like to relax that into Friday where we're doing less. And then if we do anything on Saturday, it's really just a stretch to get ready for all the energy that it takes to perform at the scholastic world level. And so our schedule is built really like front loaded in December, and then January, February, March, April, it's really built to relax into World Championships. Whereas a lot of people, I think they start small and then they put a lot on their plate as they're going towards World Championships, and that just builds a lot of stress onto the students. And so we take a reverse approach to where we want to relax into World Championships and not stress.
So when you say you front load the rehearsals, are you talking about the amount of things that you're focusing on each rehearsal, or are you talking about okay.
All right. So Tuesday we'll do a lot of learning, so that through the week it's now taking what they've learned and like really, muscle memory is a thing, right? And so the kids need as much time as possible with the material. So we try to do a lot of that learning on Tuesday or even Saturday, so that they have the week to really digest it, to really take time to do it. It's very rare that as we go into a show week that we're learning anything on Friday. Right. Really, like Tuesday is the last day we're going to learn something, because we need to set them up for feeling comfortable Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, I call it like a micro to macro approach. You start with a narrow focus. You start with maybe a lot of small things, and then as the week goes on, the phrases get longer, the ideas get bigger. The continuity and the consistency becomes the focal point, as opposed to, the execution of the 16th notes or the specific moves or whatever. So I found that to work really well.
Hey, I'm popping in because we've got a lot of really smart people watching and listening tonight, and we've gotten 3 or 4 really good questions about exactly what you guys are talking about. So if you don't mind, I want to interrupt and ask a couple of those right now.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first one is you were just talking about time frames and planning the rehearsals and all that, which is very interesting. So somebody asked, how specific do you map out the time frames? Do you keep it loose, like 10, 20-minute segments, or do you plan to the minute, or and try to give information more than the kids getting it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I try to plan out to the minute, even when we're transitioning from a sectional rehearsal, which would be outside, to moving all the gear inside. I try to account for that time. Sometimes it's just, here's the maximum amount of time you can, and then the next thing needs to start right now. And sometimes I'm out there kind of hustling people to, like, let's go, we got to get to ensemble. I try to be as articulate and clear as possible with the schedule, minute by minute. It's very rare that we'll do anything for 5 minutes as a block. So for example, if there's an hour of time in sectionals, it'll just be, here's 3:30 to 4:30, and here's some goals underneath that. And then from 3:30 to 3:40 is transit to the gym. And then here's the goals for what we're going to be doing in the gym. And then here's kind of the breakout of gym time. And then here's when the front ensemble is going to join us. So I try to visualize as much of that as possible because I won't have an opportunity to call each staff member before that rehearsal. So I'll call, one of the people who work with the battery, get some intake on what it is that they're doing, what's happening. I'll formulate my own opinions. I'll talk to the visual person. What are we doing? What needs to happen? And then I'll put a schedule together. And if there's any things that need to be changed, we've got 24 hours to respond to that, to where I could put out another schedule, a version 2, and that gets to the kids as well.
So do you ever find yourself in a rehearsal realizing, wow, they're not getting this, I'm going to need more time in adjusting on the fly? Or do you say, like, okay, that's going to come back to that the next time?
I think it's situational. I think if there are times where the students clearly need more time to digest, that's an indicator to us that we need to move on. And that's about where we're going to be right now. If they do need more time for something, then we just need to do it at the next rehearsal. But we plan things out, months and months in advance. And there's actually a Google Doc of our schedule with everybody who's going to be there on those days, our staff members. So we kind of know ahead of time what we're getting into, and the kids have that schedule as well. The kids know which staff members are going to be there on which days, on which part of the month. So they know pretty well ahead, like, what our goals are and what we're working towards. And I find that when we do that, they can focus on what they're thinking about because they have a hard time focusing. So I try to narrow their focus as much as possible.
Well, I would also assume from what you're saying that you become better at being able to know how much you can schedule in those time frames.
Absolutely. I think that's just come with experience. I feel fortunate that I've had to do all those little pieces by myself. So I have a understanding about the time that it's going to take for each one of those parts to happen. And I insert myself into each one of those processes as much as possible. So I can help move it along or whatever it takes. But I would say 90% of the time we get what we need to get done. And when we don't, the schedule has allowed for that breathing room. So we don't ever feel like we're out of time. Okay,
great. That question was from Tyler. Tyler, thank you very much. That was terrific. Now, going back to talking about setting the culture, Jack is from from Fort Worth, Texas. Sorry. You can't hear me? What happened? Can you not hear me? I can't hear you all of a sudden. Okay. Sorry, everybody. Technical glitch moment.
I can hear you, Tim. I don't know if you can hear me.
So something happened on your end, I think. Jim, why don't you come back? You're welcome to stay here during this part of the discussion if you'd like to.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. There you are. Something happened, I guess.
Okay.
I think my good looks brought all the sound back.
Okay, well then you need to stay here. So here's what I'm going to ask the question, then I'm going to go away and let
Okay.
you two have the discussion. But we do have 3 more things that are really relevant to the discussions we've been having.
Perfect.
Um,
Awesome.
Talking about building the culture. Jack from Texas asks, how long do you think it took to set the culture you wanted at Arcadia? Interesting question.
I think it's taken 20 years. I think it's taken 20 years for us to build the culture. And I would say that I'm not satisfied with the culture that we have now. And I don't know that I'll ever, or any of us will ever feel totally satisfied with where we're going, as things are constantly changing and students are changing over time, which means that we need to adapt with them. You know, the kids right now that are 17 and 18 are totally different than, you know, when I was 17 and 18. And the amount of information that students are managing is way more than I had to manage when I was their age. So they communicate differently, they think differently, they respond to information differently. And I think we're always sensitive to what that is. And so I feel like the culture is always adapting to those members. And they, you know, for us, you know, Sean Vegas says this all the time, is those members are the constituents of the program. We're there to serve them. And I 100% believe in that we are there to serve the students. They're not there to serve us. And so we're constantly listening to them, and we're constantly communicating amongst ourselves about how that's going, how we're doing in our communication with the students. So I will say that I like our culture right now. I think there's a lot of things that we can improve about our culture. We have 3 drum lines at Arcadia, which is, you know, kind of odd for a high school program. We have over 100 percussion students in our program that we're servicing. So the types of problems that we have to solve at Arcadia are sometimes different than what most programs, the problems that they're solving. And then they're also the same problems because there's still 1 drum line, you know, times 3. So we still face some of the same problems, but we need to address them in a very different way. And that forces the staff and myself to think differently about how we're, you know, the experience that we're providing for those students. So that's a really great question. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who would say that they're very happy with their culture and it's like, it's set and ready to go. The pie's in the oven, it's done, it's baked, and we can just enjoy it from here on out. I think, you know, at some point you got to make a new pie, you got to put it in the oven, and you got to, you know, that process has got to repeat over and over again. So you're constantly putting in the ingredients in. Sometimes the ingredients are the same. Sometimes your fruits are coming from the same place, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes the pie tastes different. But you've got to keep assembling it. You got to put it in the oven, and you've got to bake something that I hope everybody will enjoy. And just, you know, trust yourself and communicate as much as you can. Over communicate. That's my suggestion.
A couple things actually I kind of observed, just to piggyback on your comments, Tony, is I've seen a lot of programs where 2 things in terms of the interaction between a student and a staff, and I totally get the sentiment of that question about establish. It really makes everything more efficient, more effective. It defines kind of the personality or the character of the program. To me, it really comes down to trust from the staff, from the students to the staff, and perspective. And this being a cyclical activity, in order to set that culture, and that culture being a genuine culture, those students have to have the perspective as to why they're doing what they're doing and how that's going to lay itself out over the course of the entire season.
Sure.
So I found that culture just takes a little bit of time. Sometimes it takes a whole year, you know. Trust. I've went into situations where I've tried and kind of tried to ram my head through a wall to get something to establish, and realize like they're not going to trust me till we all go to battle together, which could very well mean going to a first show together and having that first experience, having that first performance. But
sure.
A really great question, and I echo that sentiment that you're always tweaking, you're always adjusting kids change, what they're exposed to change, how their abilities change. So awesome question. Tim, you had another question?
Absolutely. And Tony,
Awesome.
you ended your answer by saying communication. All right, so that was one of the other really good questions that we had. People want to know more about that. So Levi from Atlanta asked this question with regards to the communication with the kids, parents, directors, et cetera, about goals and aspirations. So how do you do it? Do you have weekly meetings? Do you have monthly meetings? What was the medium and formality through which these things were discussed, and how often did they happen?
Oh, that's a great question. So this happens in seasons. So the fall is very different than the indoor season because of the people that are involved and the nature of the team. So I'm going to talk specifically about what the indoor season is like and how we plan for that. We get the schedule out very, very early. We send that to the parents. We send it to the kids. And there's a lot, and we put those things up in the room, so you can't miss it. And we share our Google Doc that we have that has all the staff listed, has every single rehearsal listed for the year, and what the goals are and the facilities that we're going to need. That's another big thing is trying to plan ahead for the facilities. So we're constantly keeping in contact with the athletic director about here's what we need. Kind of checking in weeks ahead of time to make sure that that's still available, that we're still locked in for that. Checking in with our administration, making sure that they understand what our needs are with having the lights on at night, making sure that the other directors who are running other programs where we're sharing students, that we are talking about where the kids need to be and how we can plan for maybe a kid that's missing a rehearsal because he's got to do a wind ensemble rehearsal during the same day or same time. So we're very bad at that early on, and we had to learn how to respond to all of these little hurdles that we'd face when we were at rehearsal. And you never want to start a rehearsal and go, where are we going to be, and why aren't the lights on, and why isn't this? And it's really my job I feel it's my job to anticipate what problems are so that they're only my problems and they're not anybody else's problem. I feel like that's the large nature of my job. And that means I'm constantly looking for potential hurdles and potential problems. And sometimes that's about food for the students. So that means I need to talk to a parent. And sometimes that's facilities. So I need to talk to the band director. So that when the student arrives to the rehearsal, all they have to do is follow the schedule that they've been given, which is at 3:30 we're doing this, at 4:30 this is happening, and this is why and what we're doing. And here's the goal for the end of the night during ensemble. We want to be able to get this much done at this level of confidence. So we even get detailed to here's what your emotional output should be at the end of this rehearsal. You want to feel this way, right? Try to get them to connect with something like that. So the frequency of our communication is, I will say, frequent. There's nothing that is planned where it's like, well, we plan to do this and we plan to do this. We have those with parents and with the directors, but the meeting time with the staff and with the students is very fluid. It's kind of on a needs basis. And I put that time into the schedule. So if I know that I need a meeting with the staff and a meeting with the students, that's on the schedule. So that means at 3:30, there's a meeting with me and the staff and the students, and we're going to discuss, and we're going to focus in on something, and then we go to stretch. So all those meeting times are built into the rehearsal time if the message needs to be said to everybody. And anytime we need to meet as a staff, it's usually before a rehearsal, a day before, or immediately following a rehearsal, so that we don't eat up any of our time with the students.
Okay, that was fantastic. And I got to tell you, this is like demonstrating, this is how you do this at a world-class level. Like this scheduling and this level of communication, this is where people really mess up and don't get professional. So I love that we're having this conversation.
I was just getting ready to say, so basically it's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of planning. you know?
Yeah, it's a lot of planning, and I think, you talk to anybody who does this at a high level, and maybe if they've had some competitive success, there's just a ton of planning that goes into this, and I think your experience will kind of inform you how to plan. Because, I mean, let's be honest, like year after year, season after season, there's not a lot that's changing about the parameters of a competition, right? About the parameters about how to get to a competition, about how to prepare for the competition. So the parameters aren't changing much. So you've got this container, you've got this amount of time. You've really got to look at what are you doing with that time, because those parameters they're not changing, they're not shifting. And so you really have to look at if things aren't working the way that you envision them, you've got to ask yourself, what are you doing that's preventing that? It's because it's never going to be the kids' fault, right? It's never going to be their fault. And if you're finding yourself in a position where your frustration is now lying on the students, then at some point you have to realize that they're only taking in whatever you're giving them. And so your kids are only going to be as good as whatever you're giving to them, and the amount of time and the frequency and the consistency and the follow-up. So I think that's important to look at. And I think when we started implementing this Google Doc and this calendar and this kind of planning, it was a culture shock for the staff because it wasn't how I operated. I would show up at rehearsal and it's 3:25 and it's like, what are we doing? And it's like, I think we're going to do this. And then everybody respond to me. Everybody react to me the best that you can. And that is not sustainable. I think that can happen one or two times and people are like, all right, that's cool. But that doesn't get my staff prepared because I want them to be thinking about what it is that they need to do before they get there. And if I'm not preparing them to think and to frame their mindset, then I'm not setting the students up to have the most beneficial time with their staff member, right? So I feel like I'm trying to advocate for the staff so that they know what I'm thinking, how I'm planning, so that they can be the most effective, because they do. They want to be their very, very best for the students, and they're not going to be if I'm telling them 5 minutes before rehearsal what it is we're going to do. I don't feel like I'm getting the best out of them.
I'm hoping for a short answer here. Do you have specific communication platforms you use? You mentioned Google Docs in passing. Can you just sort of list, is there specific communication tools that you use?
Sure. So Google Docs, Dropbox, there's a group chat service that the staff use. There's a group chat that the students use. I'm actually not on the group chat. I kind of stay away from the group chat part of it. So they have a platform where they can talk and get into some of the nitty gritty on the details about whatever it is that they need to do about is the Met charge. Do we have batteries? Did Joey tie his shoelaces, this time? That's a level of things that I don't need to get involved with. But those are kind of the primary ways that we interact. From a design standpoint, it's really Kevin Shaw and I and Robert Bowen. We use Dropbox and we use email, and we call each other a lot.
Tony, I think it was you. I'm going to ask this question anyway, and if it wasn't, then just tell me.
Yeah.
About using a Facebook group where students or members are posting videos inside there. Did we discuss that?
Yeah, we do. Every year we do it. Cool. Yeah, with all the students, and they have video assignments, and I can put stuff up there for them as well. The calendar lives there as well. So wherever the kids are, wherever the staff is, there's always a calendar there.
Yeah. What really caught my attention on that one was the idea of like activity at home, accountability, posting videos, like, kids having to prepare. Nope, I'm going to record that video over again. That wasn't good enough. This pass of the snare break or whatever it is. Seems to be a really awesome, like, motivational tool to keep people on track. And, if I'm in the snare line and one of my friends posts a video and he smokes a snare solo and it sounds great, now I'm like, okay, well, I got to put in a little more work too. So I think that incrementally, I'm sure that helps the program grow, Yeah,
it really does. Like the snares, they have a Facebook page where they do their video assignments, or the battery, and then the front ensemble has their page where they have their video assignments. and that's where all that stuff lives. And then there's a whole world line where the visual team is involved, and it's just everybody, where all the macro information can go out. But all those video assignments, they have their own, Facebook page where they do that.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Very good. I'm sorry, Jim, I have more questions, but if you had somewhere you wanted to go.
Let's listen. We're here for them, so let's run with their questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm frustrated because we're not going to get to all of them, and they're really smart questions. So thank you again for everybody for bringing these in. So
we have
two different people asked the same. I'm sorry, what was that, Jim?
We have a plan for those people.
We do have a plan, actually, guys. I'm glad you mentioned that. We have a plan for ways. If we don't get to your questions, you're going to be able to deal with that. We're going to help you get those answers anyway. So Jim, let's remember to say that at the end. Okay, so two different people, Branson and Henry, both asked the same question. When you were talking about the day came when you realized you couldn't do it by yourself, you wanted to bring on more people, et cetera. So that brought up two really smart questions. One is, how do you approach the situation when you don't necessarily have the budget to support bringing in more people to help you? What would be your advice there? Or another way it was stated was, how do you overcome obstacles in regards to lack of funding? So there are people out there that don't have the ability to bring on another paid staff member. What would you suggest for those people?
So the approach that we've taken at Arcadia is when we want to hire somebody, they have an opportunity to say, here's what I need to make this work for me. And we have a budget, right? And so what we've done is we've put people on like a plan, like any other job would be, where this year, here's what we're going to be able to do. And that gives us a year to plan to do this and to grow your salary or to grow with you, so that we're investing in you. So I would say that we hit it, pretty much all the time with people who we're hiring. And if we can't, well, we have a plan. Here's what we can do. And I think people really appreciate when there's an open dialogue of, well, we can't do this right now, but we can definitely do this a year from now or several months from now, because that'll give us a chance to plan. We're going to invest in you because we value you. And that openness and communication is really, really important, because accountability is something that we really value. And so if we're very clear and open about what it is that you're doing, what your job is, when we need you to be here, the frequency, the quality of that time that we are wanting out of you, here's what we can pay, and then here's what we can pay over time. That transparency has always really, really helped us, because people then know what they're getting into, and they know that the expectation is that we're going to grow together, and that it's not just like a one-way street. So that's how we've tackled paying people, because it is hard, and the boosters have to come up with that money. The school district doesn't pay for any of that. So, at some level, we have to look at this like a small business. We got to take care of people. We got to create the best experience for the students. And oftentimes there is no money there for that, but it's not my job to figure that out. But there's a whole body of people who are the booster club that make up the nonprofit organization that is really helping this organization, which is the Arcadia Music Club. It really helps facilitate getting funds to pay for people to come and teach those students.
Okay, awesome. So Tyler, you asked about creating a culture of practicing, and I think that was addressed at least a little bit when we were talking about the Facebook groups and the video assignments and the interaction. That's all really smart, but if you have a follow-up about that you want to ask, Jim will explain to you how you can do that tomorrow. This is probably gonna be the last question, and I don't know how much you can get into this, but I think it's such an interesting question from Cody from Virginia that I'm gonna ask it. He says, when you're dealing with an independent group, how do you handle the different cultures coming in and aligning them with the ensembles? Since we've been talking about culture, I thought that was a really smart question.
Sure. So, an independent group is interesting in that people are coming in from all different walks of life. And I think primarily when you audition for an independent group, there's something about that group that is very attractive to you. There's something that is there that you want to insert yourself. And so I think there's a lot of fluidity with people who are coming into independent groups, that they're a little bit more liquid in their, like, letting themselves be immersed into what the staff is saying, what the technique is, what the program is offering what people are saying, even though you're not being addressed. So I think the level of awareness for a member of an independent group is a lot greater than a high school person, because the high school person they're still going to high school, and maybe this is just a class. Whereas if you're an independent group, this is something that you're paying to do out of your own pocket, right? And you have a job to pay for this. You got to put gas in your car to go get to Riverside, which is not close to anything. Or I know there's people who drive 7 hours to go to Mystique, and that's crazy. But when you make that level of sacrifice, you're also opening up yourself to have that experience. So it's pretty rare that you'll find anybody who's resistant to the culture of the program. And there are people who struggle with assimilating to the culture, and sometimes it takes people weeks and months to really kind of get it. And sometimes people don't really get it until they're standing on the floor at finals going like, oh, it comes together for them. And sometimes that's just what it is. And hopefully those people come back and they, now they're a member who's totally immersed, who understands. But I think that's a really big difference between high school and independent, is the maturity of that person is in a different place. Their brains are still developing at 20, 21, 22 still, but they have some idea about the financial risk that's involved with doing an independent group, and they're taking that risk on. So they're a little bit more invested in what it is that they're doing, because they're providing that experience for themselves, more or less.
Yeah, I'd also say to that, it reminds me of this. There's a video that's been going around on social media the last couple of weeks of like this older guy that was in this theater, and he's the only one in the theater that's not there on purpose. And so everybody else in the theater would stand up, and he would just stand up because everybody's standing up, and then they would sit down. And it was like a little bit of a case study on behavior. And the reason I bring that up is to maybe emphasize the fact that the stronger the culture is within the program, the easier it is for people to assimilate to that.
Yeah, definitely.
More of an impetus for those that are out there that are still developing that, just to develop a really strong culture, so that makes that assimilation a lot more natural.
Sure. And culture is a hard word to say, hey guys, this is what our culture is. Culture is the result of your planning and what you communicate, the energy that you put out, the energy that your staff puts out. And that is, a culture is created there. I don't think you can say this is what our culture is and this is what we want it to be. It's just a result of whatever you're practicing in your communication, in your engagement, non-engagement. I think the result is just created by all of those little, tentacles that make the octopus,
Yeah. So Tim?
Well, I got to tell you, what a stellar hour of discussion about like all of this was so amazing.
Yeah, 3 minutes. We got 3 minutes left.
We got 3 minutes. That's when you do the wrap up, so that we're timing this perfectly. So I'm going to let Jim, I'm going to let you sort of ask Tony to wrap things up. But I do want to say, Tony, man, you speak so clearly. You're so clear on how you do things, and you can communicate it so clearly. So you're really valuable to our activity. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight. And I hope that you'll continue to do that, because like the way you just knew how to explain things in a way that was so accessible, it's not a skill everybody has. And I think that comes from you being a good communicator with your students and having that educational bent. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Jim, Tony, you guys are awesome. Super impressed. What a great hour this has been. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, guys.
Thanks everybody for watching. Really appreciate it.